everybody, it's WriterPunk. In honor of Pride Month, this week's video will be dedicated to 10 tropes that contribute to poor representation for bi characters in fiction, why they're harmful, and ideas to avoid them. If you're new to my channel, I am a dark fantasy writer, artist, and hobbyist world builder. If you're not new, thanks for coming around again. So, time for a disclaimer. I am not here to lecture anyone. I am not the end-all be-all of the bi experience. I am not a representative of the bi community. I've not been elected. There's no system of governance. The best way to ensure your specific situation or your specific character does justice to the orientation is by asking bi people, preferably more than just one. Also, all orientations deserve representation, and many of these suggestions can be applied to them as well, theoretically. I don't know, because I'm not those orientations, which is why this video is just about bi people and characters. So you may be wondering, well, why do bi people need representation anyway? Studies have suggested that bi people experience higher rates of mental health issues, substance abuse, and self-injurious or suicidal thoughts and behaviors than any other orientation, including straight people. Other studies have suggested that it is on par with rates experienced by gay and lesbian people. Bi erasure, or the invalidation and invisibility of bi people, along with biphobia, or bi antagonism as dubbed by the Bisexual Resource Center, are key components in the poor mental health outcomes associated with bi people experiencing those issues. Fiction is uniquely positioned in our culture in that it allows for accurate, well-researched representation even if the author is not bi themselves. Unfortunately, bi characters still fall victim to one or more of these tropes, all of which are based in real-world stereotypes. Trope 1. The bi character is portrayed as confused, greedy, emotionally unstable, or indecisive. These traits are not predicated on someone's orientation. Anyone of any orientation or any gender can display any of these traits for a variety of reasons. Characterizing it as a function of the character's orientation implies that A, their orientation is the cause of these personality traits that society generally deems to be negative, and B, that the character lacks personal agency over their own choices and actions because of their orientation. A running theme in this video is going to be that orientation is almost never the reason for someone's bad behavior or negative traits. Everyone has done things they regret, has flaws, sometimes needs a little extra help or support, and not everyone has the kind of insight they need to figure everything out about themselves by themselves. However, by even hinting at these types of flaws in relation to the character's orientation, it implies that if they weren't bi, they might not be that way. Make it clear through characterization, prose, and every other craft tool writers have at their disposal that someone's orientation alone is not the reason they may behave a certain way. Trope 2. The bi character has no standards and will become involved with anyone and everyone who wants them. This contributes to the stereotype that bi people are easy, slutty, or completely lacking in self-control. They'll jump at anything that moves, cause bi people like everyone, right? Wrong. This trope also reeks of the idea that bi people are vulnerable to being stolen or lost to the so-called other side from any romantic relationship they're involved in, stripping them of personal responsibility and implying their sexuality makes them disloyal. Give your bi characters clear standards for romantic relationships, if there will be any romance involved at all. Make them expect respect, acceptance, trust, and understanding from their potential partners. If they're already in a relationship when the story begins, show their partner demonstrating these things even if it's just a passive aspect of their relationship. You don't necessarily need to draw specific attention to it or try to force it in somehow, because that can come across as very artificial and like, ooh, look at me, I'm so good at representation, which is something you generally want to avoid. Let bi characters be platonic friends with people of all genders without insinuating it's more than just friendship, or trying to shoehorn in love triangles and the like for drama, and portray their partners absent of jealousy, paranoia, or accusations that the bi character is trying to trick or deceive them. Bi people can and do have friends that are just friends, and whom they harbor no romantic feelings toward. And actually, a bi character specifically not getting entangled in a romance during the plot of a story would be a refreshing take in my eyes, especially if it's because it's something they just aren't looking for at the moment, and not because they need to figure things out and find themselves, or because they want freedom. Trope 3. The bi character isn't taken seriously by anyone, and their orientation is treated as a phase, attention-seeking, or denial. Bi people face discrimination from other sexualities at an alarming rate. Young bi women are often treated as attention-seeking, slutty, or trying to cling to a trend when they come out as bi. Their attraction to other women is treated as normal, friendly love, and family members especially may expect or assume they'll end up with a man. Bi men, who face some of the worst discrimination and are often the least talked about, are often treated like they're in denial about being gay despite clearly identifying as bi. Commonly, bi people of all genders will be expected to eventually pick a side. If they're in a straight relationship, they're considered not queer enough, but they're in a same-sex relationship, they're considered scared to come out. Show other characters acknowledging the bi character's orientation as valid as much as is reasonable. Again, don't just try to force it in there when it's unnatural, because it doesn't help. To be quite frank, that's not helpful. Make it clear that the bi character is attracted to men and women. Some bi people are also attracted to non-binary people, which is occasionally called pansexuality, but others included under bisexuality. Even if other characters can't or wouldn't validate them, the writing can. Reflect the validity of the bi character's orientation through the way they are portrayed by the narrator. Obviously, don't invent scenarios specifically to draw attention to it, because again, that comes across as insincere at best and performative at worst. It should be as organic and natural as possible and come at appropriate times. While we're here, I'd like to say that just because someone's queerness isn't easily seen or deduced, it does not mean that person is not queer. Being in a straight relationship does not negate bi orientation, nor does being in a same-sex relationship. Likewise, bi people are not able to choose to be straight, as we are sometimes expected to or accused of doing. Bi people are not straight, they are bi. Bi people are not gay, they are bi. Let your writing and characterization reflect that. Trope 4. The bi character is hypersexual, promiscuous, and/or reckless about sexual health and safety. Bisexual people are often accused of being dirty, riddled with STIs, and have also been accused of letting HIV/AIDS into straight communities. Particularly in mainstream society in the United States, hypersexuality and promiscuity are viewed very negatively. This sort of portrayal ascribes yet another trait to a person's orientation rather than their personal choices or beliefs. Security in one's sexuality, which I am here using to mean sexual agency and conduct, means different things to different people for different reasons. One individual may choose to abstain altogether from any sort of intimacy. Another may be in a committed monoamorous relationship and show intimacy in that relationship alone. A third might engage in simultaneous intimate relationships. Most people also do not purposefully want to infect themselves or others with serious diseases, because it should go without saying that most people aren't actively seeking to harm others. And if you think that this could be something a villain might do, there has got to be, nay I guarantee, there are better ways of portraying that somebody is evil or the villain of the story, other than having them go around and trying to infect everyone with STIs. Just listen to that again. Really, I think not. Show bi characters taking precautions when engaging in intimate acts. Show them practicing safe, taking charge of their well-being, and otherwise being responsible with their bodies and the bodies of their partners. Make it clear that if they are being reckless, it's tied to their personal choice and not their orientation, and that it doesn't mean other bi characters feel or act the same. Even in fantasy, which generally doesn't include settings like modern health clinics or birth control, this trope can still be avoided. Show characters halting physical intimacy before it goes too far, if pregnancy is a concern, for example. Think about how promiscuity might be treated in a setting that doesn't include the real-world religious or cultural beliefs that uphold modesty, chastity, and celibacy as virtues. Trope 5. The bi character is portrayed as polyamorous because they are bi. Polyamory is a type of relationship and interpersonal philosophy that does not inherently imply a specific orientation of any relationship member. Poly people and relationships can be straight, gay, lesbian, bi, pan, ace, or a combination of all these and other orientations. Bi people can be monoamorous. Because of the way polyamory is perceived in mainstream American society, this trope also implies that bi people are greedy, incapable of achieving happiness in a monoamorous relationship, or are unfaithful. Not only is it harmful toward bi people, it also assumes poly people are bi by necessity and is also insulting toward them. If your bi character is poly, make it clear that it's not because they are bi, but because they're poly. There are also different styles of polyamorous relationships. Not every individual is in a relationship with every other individual in the relationship, so differing orientations may come into play. This trope bleeds into trope 6, so let's continue on to that one. Trope 6. The bi character is serially unfaithful in monoamorous relationships or secretly lusts after one or more characters outside the relationship. Bi people have a tendency to be viewed as unfaithful, lustful, or disloyal. If they're not cheating, they're thinking about it, which may be because they want the best of both worlds or miss the other side. They're treated as if unable to commit, sometimes for a perceived fear of missing out, and other times because their orientation is mistaken as a declaration of polyamory, like said prior to this. As with the suggestions in Trope 2, show the partners of bi characters demonstrating respect and trust. You really don't need to have them say, "Hey, I know you're bi, but I respect you, so I trust you not to cheat on me," or something like that, because that just boomerangs back around into insinuating that they would do that otherwise, and also sounds extremely artificial. If the bi character is hit on while in a relationship, show them rejecting the advance and communicating with their partner about it. If cheating is at the heart of the story or deals with a relationship otherwise falling apart, make sure it is absolutely clear that the infidelity or breakdown on the part of the bi character did not occur solely because of their orientation. Trope 7. The bi character's entire identity is predicated on their orientation. People have more substance than their orientation. It does not define a person's entire existence. Some bi people, in fact, go their entire lives without coming out, or only come out to a trusted few. Writing convincing characters, regardless of orientation or any other part of their identity, necessitates them having depth to their personalities, motivations, goals, pasts, and desires. At worst, this trope can devolve into tokenism or unintended comedy, which is a whole other Pandora's box of no. Trope 8. The bi character's orientation is used for jokes or gags. Bi people have had to fight hard for inclusion even within the LGBT community. Playing their orientation or anyone else's for laughs just lacks tact and empathy. Jokes between members of an in-group about that in-group are usually well received because the members share intimate knowledge of the inner workings and struggles of that group. When someone not in the in-group makes the same joke, it might become offensive because that person doesn't understand the issues, experiences, and struggles of the in-group well enough for the joke to stick. ContraPoints, a YouTuber who makes video essays about orientation, gender, politics, and other controversial topics, has an excellent video on this subject called The Darkness, which I'll link below. If you want your bi character or other characters to make jokes about their orientation and you aren't bi, ask bi people if they're willing to read and offer advice if necessary to make sure the joke will land well. This may be good practice even if you are bi because different people will have different experiences, tolerances, and senses of humor. It's important to remember though that you will never be able to please everyone. Someone, somewhere, will always be offended even if you did everything right and put in the work to educate yourself. This is true of pretty much every aspect of writing. Trope 9. Bisexuality is fetishized or engaged in for performative purposes. First, a definition in case you're unfamiliar with these two terms. The cliché example of two women engaging in intimate acts for the pleasure of a straight man, especially if they would not have otherwise done so, is an example of a character performing bisexuality. It also exemplifies fetishism by reducing an orientation to the object of someone's sexual gratification, usually someone who's straight. Another example would be a non-bi person performing an intimate act with one or more people of the same or opposite sex for the express purpose of achieving some goal or gaining some edge when their true orientation is at odds with that action. This is harmful because it objectifies bi people and portrays their orientation as a fetish by implying bisexual acts are engaged in solely for the gratification of onlookers, particularly straight men. This also feeds back into the idea that bisexuality is a phase, or that someone is just tinkering around and seeing what they like before they pick a side. Tips to avoid this one are just don't. I don't really know what else to say about this because I can't think of a scenario in which this would need to be negated other than the scenarios in which this trope already exists, and they're not great. Trope 10. The character is ambiguously not straight, but also not gay. In my opinion, this is one of the most insidious mistakes a fiction writer can make when writing characters with an invisible orientation, because it shows a clear lack of understanding of bi-erasure and how deeply it affects the community. Also, while I have this opportunity, I want to draw attention to asexuality, another invisible and oft-erased orientation, which falls victim to this trope time and time again. Can you think of a single canonically, unambiguously asexual character? Because I can't. Make characters with invisible orientations visible. Bi and ace readers aren't psychic and cannot always detect that a character was meant to represent them using the given story context alone. If words like orientation or slang terms like ace would feel out of place in your setting, I promise you there are still ways to visibly and concretely convey to the reader that a character is not straight or allosexual. There's nothing terribly modern about the phrases, "I like men and women," or "I feel no desire for intimate physical contact, never have, never will." So to all my fantasy peeps who cry that it will break immersion, again, I promise you it is possible to make these sexualities visible. Alright, well, these have been 10 bi-character blunders that I hope I have given you some insight on the harmfulness of and how it can be avoided. I've left some study citations and resource links in the description box for those interested in looking further into the topic. Please remember again that I do not speak for all bi people or the entire bi experience. And again, I beseech you, if you don't know, ask, go find out, research, talk to bi people. Now that all that's out, I think that's where I'm going to leave things for today. As always, I appreciate all likes, comments, and subscriptions. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on Saturday for Wordstock.